The sun was bright that afternoon, casting a warm glow on the busy city streets. People were moving quickly, some walking with purpose, others just enjoying the day. Cars moved steadily, horns honking every now and then, blending into the rhythm of city life. On one of the sidewalks, a young black girl stood at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. She was around 16 or 17, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. Her hair was braided neatly and she had headphones on, listening to music. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed a spark of curiosity, watching the people around her. She had always enjoyed her walks through this part of the city. The streets were full of life, with shops and cafes lining the roads, people chatting, laughing, and going about their daily routines. Today she felt comfortable, enjoying the warm air and the sounds of the city mixing with her music. She tapped her foot lightly to the beat, completely lost in her world. Suddenly, the low rumble of motorcycles approached from a distance. The sound grew louder and louder, until a group of bikers appeared, riding confidently down the street. Their leather jackets and chrome bikes gleamed in the sunlight, and they carried themselves with an air of daring that made everyone around them pause for a moment. People stepped aside to let them pass, some even slowing down to watch the impressive machines glide through the street. Among the group of bikers was one man who seemed to stand out, not for his skills or his bike, but for his attitude. He was the loudest, making jokes and shouting at pedestrians as he rode. When he spotted the young girl, something shifted in him. He slowed down just enough to get her attention, smirking as he shouted mocking words at her. His voice was rough and teasing, and he clearly expected her to react. The girl froze for a moment, surprised by the sudden attention. She had faced small moments of unkindness before, but something about the way he singled her out in public felt heavier, more intimidating. She tried to keep her expression neutral, pretending not to notice, hoping that if she ignored him, he would ride on. Her hands gripped the straps of her small backpack, and she took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. Around her, a few pedestrians noticed what was happening. A woman walking her dog paused, frowning at the biker. A man crossing the street glanced over, shaking his head in disapproval. No one spoke directly to the biker, but their looks carried a message. This behavior was not acceptable. The city around them continued, but a small bubble of tension had formed, centered on this young girl and the mocking biker. The biker laughed at her lack of response, clearly expecting her to react in anger or embarrassment. He called out more words, trying to provoke a reaction, but the girl stayed quiet. Her heart beat faster, not from fear but from the frustration of being targeted unfairly. She reminded herself that his words said more about him than they did about her. She had learned this lesson from past experiences, but hearing it from someone so loud and aggressive in public made it harder to stay composed. The other bikers didn't seem to care much about what was happening. They rode alongside him, occasionally looking around, some laughing at his jokes, others focused on the road ahead. They were part of the same group, but they didn't intervene or encourage him. It was as if they were indifferent, letting one member of their group act out while they simply passed through the city streets. The girl could feel the attention of the biker like a weight pressing on her shoulders. She wished she could disappear for a moment, find a quiet corner, and escape the eyes of someone who was trying to belittle her. But she also knew she couldn't run. She was strong enough to endure this small moment of cruelty, and she wanted to face it with dignity. She adjusted her backpack straps and straightened her posture, trying to show that she would not be intimidated. As the motorcycles moved slowly past her, the biker made one final loud remark, clearly satisfied with the impression he thought he had made. He didn't see the small crowd of onlookers, some whispering to each other, some shaking their heads, all silently judging him for his behavior. The city street, once just a backdrop to her walk, had become a stage for a small but significant act of disrespect. The girl's mind raced with a mix of emotions. Anger, frustration, and a touch of embarrassment ran through her, but she focused on controlling them. She reminded herself that she had walked through many challenges before, and that one person's unkind words could not define her worth. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and waited for the light to change. This was her city too, and she had every right to walk its streets without being mocked. The traffic light turned, and the girl stepped forward carefully, her steps measured and deliberate. She wanted to keep moving, to leave the uncomfortable moment behind without letting it consume her. The sound of the motorcycles faded into the distance, but the memory of the interaction stayed with her. It was a reminder that not everyone in the world would treat her with respect. but also a reminder of her own strength in facing these moments with grace. As she continued down the street, her mind wandered to other thoughts: school, friends, music, and the small joys of life that often distracted her from the occasional cruelty she faced. She reminded herself that moments like this, while unpleasant, did not define her day. She could carry on, focusing on the things that brought her happiness and fulfillment. The city around her returned to its usual rhythm, and she blended back into the flow of pedestrians, feeling a little more determined, a little more resilient. In that brief encounter, a small story had unfolded, one of unkindness, strength, and quiet resistance. The young girl had stood her ground, even when faced with someone trying to put her down. She had not responded with anger, nor had she let the words shake her confidence. She had walked on, reminding herself of her own dignity and the power of staying composed under pressure. The city continued around her, unaware of the small but meaningful battle that had just taken place on one busy sidewalk, and she continued on her way, carrying herself with the quiet courage that defined her. The city continued to hum with activity as the young girl walked away from the crosswalk, still feeling the weight of the brief encounter with the biker. Her steps were steady, but her mind replayed the mocking words, trying to push them aside. She told herself it didn't matter, that one person's cruelty could not touch her confidence or her spirit. Still, a small knot of tension lingered, and she could feel the eyes of nearby pedestrians following her, as if sensing the quiet strength in her posture. A few blocks away, the biker and his group were slowing down, chatting and laughing among themselves. The man who had singled out the girl felt satisfied with his performance, not realizing how small and insignificant his actions had appeared in the larger world around him. He was unaware of the ripple his words had caused, and of the fact that someone had been watching him closely from a distance. At that very moment, a black SUV moved smoothly through the streets just behind the bikers. Inside the vehicle, Dwayne Johnson was driving, enjoying a rare afternoon break from his busy schedule. He had come into the city for an event, but had taken a moment to walk through some of the streets in his car, observing the life of the city and enjoying the ordinary scenes that often went unnoticed. His presence was quiet, unassuming, blending into the traffic as if he were just another driver. He noticed the group of motorcycles ahead, their engines rumbling and drawing attention. At first, he was simply curious, as he always found motorcycles interesting and enjoyed watching people move through the streets with skill and freedom. But then he saw something that made him slow down and pay much closer attention. One of the bikers had pulled up to a young girl at the crosswalk and was shouting words at her, mocking her in a way that was cruel and unnecessary. Dwayne watched carefully, noting her calm but tense posture and the way she seemed to brace herself against the words. He could see the effort she was making to stay composed, and he felt a pang of concern. He had seen people face unkindness before, but there was something about this moment that made him want to step in. It wasn't about heroics or being noticed. It was about basic decency, about someone standing up for a young girl who was facing unprovoked mockery in public. As he continued to follow the bikers, Dwayne observed the reactions of others nearby. Pedestrians had paused, some shaking their heads, some whispering to each other, all silently acknowledging that what was happening was wrong. The girl herself did not respond to the biker's words, which showed her strength, but it also highlighted how important it was for someone else to intervene. Sometimes the presence of a calm authority could make a bigger difference than words alone. The traffic light ahead changed, and the girl began to cross the street, putting distance between herself and the biker. Dwayne kept his car at a careful distance, moving along slowly so he could stay nearby without alarming anyone. He was patient, knowing that timing and approach mattered more than rushing in. The biker continued to ride, still laughing and making jokes, completely unaware that someone was observing him with a focused and measured attention. As the girl moved further away, the biker noticed a vehicle slowly following him. He glanced over his shoulder, curiosity flickering in his eyes, but he paid it little attention, assuming it was just another car in traffic. He had no idea that the driver inside was someone capable of commanding attention without ever raising a voice, someone who could make an ordinary person feel the weight of respect simply through presence. Dwayne continued his careful pursuit, signaling subtly to the biker to slow down. His aim was not to intimidate, but to give the biker a chance to reflect on his actions before they escalated any further. The city around them moved on, pedestrians walking by, the occasional honk from a car, the distant sounds of a street musician playing a tune, blending into a background that seemed to fade away for the moment. In that small pocket of time, the focus was entirely on the young girl, the biker, and the quiet observer. The biker finally realized that the vehicle behind him was staying unusually close. He slowed slightly, trying to gauge the situation, but he still did not recognize the driver. Dwayne parked the car at a safe distance and stepped out, walking calmly toward the biker. His movement was deliberate and measured, exuding confidence and calm authority. The crowd of pedestrians nearby began to notice, whispering to each other, sensing that something important was about to happen. Some took out their phones, anticipating a confrontation, but Dwayne's presence was so calm and composed that it did not feel aggressive. It felt purposeful. The young girl, still walking a few blocks away, sensed a change in the air. Something was happening behind her, and though she could not see clearly, she felt a quiet reassurance, as if someone was there to ensure she was safe. She kept moving forward, her steps careful, but with a slight lift in her posture. The tension that had lingered moments ago began to ease slightly, replaced by a sense of hope that not all encounters in life would be harsh or unjust. Dwayne approached the biker steadily, speaking in a calm, firm voice that carried over the rumble of the motorcycles and the ambient city noise. He addressed the man directly, pointing out the inappropriate behavior, explaining how unkind words could impact others, and highlighting the importance of treating people with respect. His tone was not angry or aggressive. It was authoritative and composed, demanding attention without shouting or causing panic. The biker, now realizing the seriousness of the situation, looked surprised. He had expected no consequences, no authority, and certainly not the calm but commanding presence he faced now. His laughter faltered, and he began to sense that his actions had been noticed in a way he had not anticipated. The crowd of pedestrians who had gathered to watch the exchange remained quiet, some nodding in agreement with Dwayne's words, others recording the moment quietly on their phones. The young girl, noticing the interaction from a distance, felt a mixture of relief and astonishment. She could see that someone was standing up for her, but more importantly that this intervention was calm, composed, and respectful. She felt a spark of courage within herself, realizing that even in moments of public ridicule, there were people who would stand by her dignity and ensure that respect was maintained. Dwayne continued to speak, emphasizing empathy, respect, and the importance of thinking before acting. He made it clear that mockery, especially based on appearance or identity, was unacceptable. The biker, now quiet and somewhat ashamed, began to understand the gravity of his behavior. He had been reckless with his words, thinking they were harmless jokes, but he now saw how they could hurt someone deeply and publicly. After a few moments, the tension in the air began to shift. The biker apologized, a genuine expression of embarrassment crossing his face. Dwayne nodded, acknowledging the apology, and reminded him once again that the best way forward was to learn from this experience and act with more thoughtfulness in the future. The crowd began to disperse slowly, many murmuring to each other about the unusual but impactful moment they had just witnessed. The young girl walked a little closer, stopping a safe distance away, and Dwayne turned to acknowledge her. She offered a quiet, heartfelt thanks, and he reassured her that she had nothing to fear and that she had handled herself with strength. His words were simple, kind, and empowering, leaving an impression that would stay with her long after the moment had passed. The city street returned to its usual rhythm, but for the girl, the biker, and even some of the onlookers, a small but meaningful story had unfolded. It was a story of cruelty confronted with dignity, of strength met with compassion, and of kindness that appeared just when it was most needed. Dwayne returned to his vehicle quietly, blending back into the city, leaving behind a moment that had made a real difference in someone's life. The city streets were buzzing with activity as the young girl continued walking, still feeling the adrenaline from the earlier encounter. Her steps were careful but steady, her mind replaying the events as she tried to process what had just happened. The mocking biker had faded into the distance, but the presence of someone like Dwayne Johnson had left a lasting impression. It was rare to witness someone stand up with such calm authority, and it reminded her that not all encounters with cruelty ended in silence. Meanwhile, Dwayne Johnson had parked his vehicle at a safe distance his large frame moving with deliberate confidence as he approached the biker. The man, still riding slowly, noticed the figure walking toward him and felt a flicker of unease. He could not immediately recognize the person, but the presence carried weight. There was a quiet intensity in the way the man moved, a seriousness in his eyes that immediately put the biker on edge. Dwayne stopped a few feet away, his posture relaxed but commanding. He didn't yell or make sudden movements. Instead, he spoke firmly, his voice steady and clear. He pointed out the biker's behavior, explaining how mocking someone in public could deeply affect their sense of self. He spoke not from anger, but from a place of reason, guiding the biker to understand the impact of his actions. The words were simple but powerful, a direct challenge to the man's careless behavior. The biker tried to brush it off at first, muttering something under his breath, attempting to maintain his bravado. But the calm authority of Dwayne was impossible to ignore. There was no aggression, no threat, only a clear expectation that respect and decency mattered. The people around them began to notice, forming a small circle at a respectful distance, whispering to each other about the unusual confrontation. Some held their phones, unsure if they were witnessing a scene that would go viral, while others simply watched, captivated by the unfolding moment. Dwayne explained how words could carry power, not just in moments like these but in every interaction. He shared that mocking someone, especially for who they are or how they look, was a reflection of one's own character, not the person being mocked. The biker's face shifted from smirk to confusion and then to embarrassment as he began to realize the weight of his behavior. He had acted without thinking, assuming that public spaces were places where he could dominate with jokes and jeers, not realizing the responsibility every individual carries in shaping how others experience the world. The young girl, seeing this from a distance, felt her heart lighten. She could see Dwayne's approach and the way he handled the situation. There was no shouting or humiliation, only a calm insistence on fairness and respect. It was a lesson not just for the biker, but for anyone watching. Cruelty could be met with strength and compassion, not aggression. She felt a quiet pride in herself as well, knowing she had faced the initial harassment without letting it break her composure. The small lift in her chest was a mix of relief and inspiration. Dwayne continued speaking to the biker, giving examples of how simple actions could affect people's lives. He encouraged the biker to reflect, to think about the kind of person he wanted to be, and how small moments of kindness could make a lasting impact. The words were straightforward, yet they carried an emotional weight that resonated deeply. The biker, now quiet and attentive, began to absorb the lesson. He could no longer rely on humor or arrogance to hide the discomfort and shame rising within him. The crowd of onlookers felt the change in energy. The tension that had been building as Dwayne approached had transformed into a collective awareness. People began to whisper among themselves, some nodding in approval, others simply taking in the moment. The city, usually indifferent to such minor dramas, now held its breath, watching a rare and meaningful act of accountability unfold. There was no chaos, no shouting, only the focused presence of one individual insisting on what was right. After a few minutes, the biker muttered a quiet apology, the first genuine words he had spoken since the encounter began. Dwayne acknowledged it, nodding slightly, and reminded him that apologies were only meaningful when followed by a change in behavior. The biker nodded, clearly humbled and reflecting on how different this moment was from any other day on the streets. He realized that what he had intended as a joke had real consequences, and that dignity and respect mattered more than fleeting amusement. The young girl stepped closer, remaining cautious but curious. She could see the biker's reaction and the calm presence of the man who had intervened. Her lips parted slightly in a small smile, feeling gratitude and relief that someone had stood up for her when she had felt vulnerable. Dwayne turned to acknowledge her, offering a reassuring nod and a few encouraging words. It was a subtle gesture, yet it carried immense meaning. She was seen, respected, and protected in a way that did not diminish her own strength. As the biker rode away slowly, still processing the events, the young girl and the bystanders remained, absorbing the quiet lesson of the encounter. Dwayne returned to his vehicle, moving away just as calmly as he had arrived, leaving behind a space where the impact of his actions lingered. The city street resumed its rhythm, but the moment had left a mark on those who had witnessed it. The girl walked forward with her head held higher, feeling empowered by the support she had received. and inspired to carry herself with confidence in future moments. The small circle of people who had watched the confrontation dispersed gradually, each person carrying with them a sense of the unusual event they had witnessed. Conversations began quietly, some reflecting on how rare it was to see someone intervene with such calm and authority. Others talked about the importance of standing up for one another, even in ordinary moments, and how simple acts of courage could have ripple effects far beyond the immediate situation. The young girl listened to some of these reflections as she continued down the street, realizing that even in fleeting moments, the world could demonstrate fairness and decency. In the aftermath, the biker's posture had changed. His arrogance was replaced with humility, and his understanding of the consequences of his words had grown. He had been confronted in a way that did not humiliate him, but instead guided him toward reflection and self-awareness. It was a lesson in accountability that he would likely remember for a long time, perhaps influencing how he treated others in the future. The incident became more than a confrontation. It became a turning point, showing how one person's calm intervention could influence the behavior of another. For the young girl, the experience was transformative. She had faced public mockery and emerged not just unbroken, but strengthened by the support she received. She realized that courage did not always require confrontation. Sometimes it meant maintaining composure and dignity, while others stepped in to ensure fairness. The presence of someone who cared, someone who acted without seeking recognition, left a lasting impact. She felt a quiet sense of security and confidence that she would carry with her beyond this one afternoon. The streets around them returned to normal, the distant hum of cars and chatter of pedestrians blending back into the usual city rhythm. Yet for the girl and those who witnessed the event, a story had unfolded, one that demonstrated that kindness, calm authority, and standing up for others mattered. Even small actions could leave a significant mark, reminding everyone involved that the choices made in fleeting moments could define not just that day, but the lives touched by those actions. As she walked further, the girl reflected on the experience, feeling gratitude and a sense of hope. The city, often indifferent and fast-moving, had momentarily paused to witness a quiet but powerful lesson. She realized that while challenges and unkindness were inevitable, strength, dignity, and the support of others could transform those moments into something meaningful. It was a reminder that courage came in many forms, and that even ordinary streets could host extraordinary moments of human connection. The young girl had walked a few more blocks when she finally stopped to catch her breath. Her heart was still beating a little faster than usual, a mixture of adrenaline and relief. She felt the warmth of the sun on her face and tried to take a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs. It was strange to feel such a mix of emotions all at once. On one hand, she had faced ridicule and mockery, a moment she wished had never happened. On the other hand, she had just witnessed an act of kindness and courage that restored her faith in people. Meanwhile, the biker had come to a slow stop a block away. He sat on his bike, hands gripping the handlebars, and thought about the words that had been said to him. The calm authority, the directness, and the empathy of the person who confronted him weighed heavily on his mind. He had initially laughed, thinking it was all just a joke, but now he understood the impact of his actions. He felt a mix of shame and realization. He had been reckless, not only toward the young girl, but toward the public space they shared. It was a moment he knew he would remember. The city around them carried on. People passed by, returning to their routines, some still talking quietly about what they had seen. The young girl glanced back, curious, and caught sight of the biker in deep thought. There was no bravado now, only a reflective posture that suggested he was processing what had occurred. She felt a quiet sense of closure, knowing that he was at least beginning to understand the harm he had caused. Dwayne Johnson, who had quietly returned to his vehicle, observed from a distance. He watched the biker reflect and the young girl regain her composure. He did not need to stay. His role had been fulfilled. Sometimes stepping in was about timing and presence, not about lingering or taking control. The impact of a calm and respectful confrontation could ripple far beyond the immediate moment, and he had seen that ripple begin. The young girl continued to walk, her steps lighter than before. She felt a mix of gratitude and pride. Gratitude for the person who had stepped in to defend her when she was unable to do it herself, and pride in her own ability to remain composed under pressure. Her mind replayed the encounter, but she noticed something different now. She wasn't just thinking about the mockery. She was thinking about the courage, the fairness, and the lesson of respect that had been demonstrated. She realized that this experience had given her a new perspective on facing challenges. The biker, still seated on his bike, began to speak quietly to himself. He admitted to himself that he had acted poorly. It was not a moment of dramatics, but an honest acknowledgement that he had crossed a line. He thought about how he could do better in the future, how he could treat people with respect even when joking seemed harmless. The encounter had left a mark on him, a lesson that would likely influence his behavior going forward. The bystanders, too, were reflecting on what had happened. Some had filmed parts of the event on their phones, sharing with friends the rare instance of a celebrity stepping in to correct unkind behavior. Others simply discussed it quietly, analyzing the calm but firm approach that had resolved the situation without escalation. It became clear to many that confrontation did not always need anger or aggression. Sometimes, clarity, empathy, and authority were enough to change a behavior. The young girl, walking through the familiar streets, noticed the small details of life returning around her. The sound of a street musician playing a soft tune, the laughter of children in a nearby park, the aroma of food from a cafe. All of these small moments seemed brighter now. She had faced an unpleasant experience, yes, but she had also witnessed goodness and fairness in action. It reminded her that the world was not always cruel, and that people could step up to support one another in meaningful ways. The biker eventually started riding again, but this time with a different posture. He was more subdued, thoughtful, and less interested in showing off. His attention to his surroundings was sharper, and he seemed to be processing not just his actions, but the larger lesson of how to coexist respectfully in public spaces. Even small acts of kindness or intervention, he realized, could change the course of someone else's day, and perhaps even his own outlook on life. The young girl continued on her path, now smiling faintly to herself. She thought about the courage it took for someone to intervene, and the quiet confidence required to stand up without escalating a situation. It made her feel stronger, as if she could carry this lesson with her into other parts of her life. She understood now that being treated with respect sometimes required others to act, but also required her own strength and composure to meet challenges head-on. In the following moments, she noticed people beginning to return to their usual activities, but with a subtle shift. There was an awareness in the air, a recognition that kindness and accountability had been demonstrated in a public space. The encounter had left a mark not only on those directly involved but also on those who witnessed it, offering a reminder that moments of integrity and courage could occur anywhere, even on an ordinary city street. Dwayne Johnson drove away quietly, blending back into the rhythm of the city. He left no fanfare or spectacle behind. What mattered was the lesson imparted and the subtle reassurance to the young girl that her dignity had been recognized and defended. The biker, humbled by the experience, carried with him a new awareness that his actions had consequences and that he could choose to act differently in the future. The young girl arrived at her destination feeling. The city had settled into its usual rhythm by the time the young girl reached the corner of another busy street. She felt lighter now, carrying with her the lessons of the afternoon. The sunlight seemed softer, the air warmer, and the sounds of the city, car horns, conversations, footsteps more alive. She reflected on what had happened, replaying the moments in her mind. The mocking biker, the calm and firm intervention, and the way people had responded to the small drama that had unfolded. It was a day that would stay with her, not because of fear or embarrassment, but because of the unexpected kindness and courage she had witnessed. Meanwhile, the biker rode more cautiously now, his mind heavy with thought. The humiliation he had initially feared was replaced by a sense of awareness. He realized that what he had thought was just a joke had real consequences. The lesson was simple but profound. Every action mattered, and words could hurt far more than he had imagined. His arrogance had been replaced by reflection. He felt ashamed of the way he had treated the young girl, but he also felt grateful for the intervention that had guided him toward understanding. He knew that this experience could shape his future interactions, reminding him to pause, think, and act with kindness. The young girl, now at a small park near the end of her walk, sat on a bench for a moment to gather her thoughts. People around her played, laughed, and went about their day, unaware of the events that had just unfolded in the nearby streets. She felt a quiet sense of pride. She had faced an uncomfortable situation with composure, and she had been supported in a way that reminded her of the goodness in people. Her mind wandered to the lessons she had learned: resilience, courage, and the importance of standing up for others when possible. In the hours following the incident, onlookers who had recorded the brief encounter on their phones began sharing it online. The story spread quickly, capturing the attention of people across the city and beyond. Comments poured in, praising the calm and compassionate intervention, the young girl's composure, and the importance of empathy in public spaces. The video became a reminder that small actions could have a wide impact. People were discussing not just the confrontation, but the lessons it carried about human decency and courage. The young girl noticed the messages and posts appearing online. Some were from people she didn't know, offering words of support and encouragement. She smiled quietly, feeling validated in her experience. She realized that while the mocking biker had sought to shame her, the world responded differently. Strangers, inspired by what they saw, reminded her that standing up for one another mattered. The moment had transformed from a personal challenge into a broader story about respect, kindness, and the human spirit. The biker, too, began seeing the videos and comments shared online. At first, he felt a twinge of embarrassment, realizing that his actions had been witnessed by so many. But as he watched the reactions and read the reflections of others, he understood the deeper significance. The attention was not on him as a troublemaker, but on the lesson he had learned and the courage displayed by those around him. It was a humbling experience, and he knew it would influence how he treated people in the future. For the first time, he truly grasped the power of accountability. For Dwayne Johnson, the impact of the afternoon was quiet but lasting. He had stepped in not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. He continued with his day, blending into the city and returning to his work and engagements. Yet he knew that the ripple effects of his actions would reach far beyond the moment. The young girl would carry the lesson of being seen and respected. The biker would carry the lesson of accountability and empathy, and those who witnessed the event would carry a reminder that small acts of courage mattered. The young girl returned home, feeling stronger than when she had left that morning. She reflected on the series of events and realized how much one person's intervention could change the course of a day, or even a life. She felt motivated to continue standing tall, knowing that her dignity was worth protecting and that the kindness of others could create a sense of safety and empowerment. She thought about her future walks through the city, knowing she could face challenges with composure and courage. In the days following the event, the story continued to circulate online, inspiring people to act with empathy and respect in their own lives. The young girl received messages of encouragement from strangers, reminding her that her calm response and the support she received had touched many. The biker reflected deeply on his actions, determined to make better choices and to act with thoughtfulness in public spaces. The lesson was clear: accountability and compassion could coexist even in moments of tension. As life went on, the city streets returned to their familiar rhythm, but the lessons remained. The young girl walked with more confidence, carrying the memory of the afternoon with her as a source of strength. The biker became more mindful, understanding that his behavior could impact others and that he had the power to choose respect over mockery. And for the people who witnessed or heard of the event, the story served as a quiet reminder that human decency, courage, and kindness were still present, even in ordinary moments. The young girl often thought back to that day, recalling the way Dwayne had intervened calmly, the way the crowd had reacted, and the way she had managed to stay composed. It was a memory that gave her courage in later challenges, a reminder that even in difficult moments, support and understanding could appear unexpectedly. The experience shaped her perspective on human interaction, empathy, and the power of calm intervention. The biker, too, carried the memory forward. He remembered the weight of the words spoken to him, the way he had felt humbled and reflective, and the way the young girl had responded with dignity. It was a turning point in his understanding of behavior and consequence, a lesson that he would not forget. The encounter had reshaped his view on how to treat others, reminding him that small moments of respect could leave lasting impacts. The city continued to move, people coming and going, living their ordinary lives, yet some carried with them the lessons from that afternoon. It was a story that would not be forgotten by those who had witnessed it directly or indirectly. The young girl's resilience, the biker's reflection, and the calm courage of Dwayne had created a moment that showed the power of kindness, empathy, and accountability. It was a reminder that even in the most ordinary settings, extraordinary lessons could unfold. The young girl's life continued with the quiet confidence gained from that experience. She walked the streets with awareness, composure, and a sense of empowerment. She remembered the lesson that dignity and kindness could coexist, that courage did not always require confrontation, and that the presence of others could make a difference in moments of vulnerability. Her experience became part of her strength, shaping her character and her understanding of the world. The biker, too, carried the memory as a lesson in humility and empathy. He thought about it whenever he encountered someone new, reminding himself to pause, reflect, and act with consideration. The brief encounter had left a lasting mark, showing him that accountability and reflection were not signs of weakness, but of growth. He had learned the value of treating others with respect and the lasting impact of even small gestures. The story, now shared widely, inspired countless others. People began to speak about the importance of standing up for one another, of acting with empathy and fairness, and of intervening calmly in situations of public mockery or injustice. The young girl and the biker became symbols of reflection, courage, and growth, and the moment became a quiet yet powerful reminder that ordinary days could hold extraordinary lessons. As the sun set on the city streets, the young girl walked home, her heart light and her spirit strong. She had faced a challenge, witnessed courage, and learned valuable lessons about herself and the people around her. The biker had learned a lesson of his own, and the ripple effects of that afternoon continued to spread through the city and beyond. It was a day that would remain in the memories of those involved, a testament to the power of human decency, courage, and the quiet but profound impact of standing up for what is right. A quiet sense of accomplishment. She had survived the mockery, witnessed an act of bravery, and learned an important lesson about human decency. The events of the day had tested her patience and composure, but she had emerged not only unbroken but stronger. She reflected on how small acts of courage and empathy could create ripples far beyond the immediate situation, influencing others in ways that were not always visible. The city continued to move, people coming and going, unaware of the small but significant story that had unfolded. Yet for those who were part of it, the moment had meaning. The young girl's strength, the biker's reflection, the bystander's awareness, and the calm intervention had all contributed to a meaningful interaction that highlighted the importance of respect, empathy, and integrity in everyday life.